CEOs, and it's by actually influencing the CEOs to make the changes. The politicians are actually are losing a bit of their power, because if you look at someone like Amazon, for example, albeit in America, it's not the government who's raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It's actually Amazon who raised the minimum wage, albeit I think they've also received some undue pressure. But it was also, we were talking about vaporizers and how they've been made illegal. Now, Walmart in America have actually stopped selling vaporizers because of that particular reason. So it's the CEOs in some ways who are actually making the decisions, who are making those little changes, and if they can be targeted rather than the politicians,
it's vested interest again, isn't it? Because they're only doing it.
But that also comes down to competition, because if they don't do it, somebody else will, and it also comes to be that the first one who actually goes to market with a decision or a change is the ones who will be recognised for it. So it still comes under competition, which comes under a capitalist society. Is it not?
In that
because
way, yes, it
capitalism
can.
is competitive. Is being competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you see, just because something is intrinsically flawed and corrupt and harmful doesn't mean that it can't have some good influences as well.
That's correct. Yeah, look, there's But anyway, so the other thing we were talking
about power. So you said well, the CEOs, and of course they have power because they have the money. See, the CEOs, the politicians don't have the money. And, for instance, one of the things that we're going to be faced with pretty quickly is a crisis of currency. Because, for instance, if you go to Japan and places like that, a lot of people just pay by phone now. They don't pay by credit card. And what's interesting, you see, is that gold got uncoupled from the dollar by Richard Nixon, the then president of America, in 1971. And it's only because America is essentially so enormous, and that gold and oil are in dollars that the dollar has actually maintained its prominence. And of course, all you have to do is look at the UK. The UK, did you know the sterling used to be 1 sterling to $4.86? That was the exchange rate at one point. And did you also know that any international money transfer has to go through a financial system in Belgium, which is controlled by the Americans, called SWIFT? All financial international interactions, therefore, is dollar controlled. And these cryptocurrencies are bypassing all of that, which potentially means there's going to be a big rupture throughout the world. Because remember what we said, money is power. And if you remove power from America, you're going to have some seismic, cataclysmic changes.
Well, there's already elements of that happening, particularly in California, who were the fifth, I think even the fourth at one point largest economy in the world. They're now the seventh, but even so, they're going through some huge problems right now, because they've got all these regulations, too many regulations. When we talk about regulations, they've gone through so many. They've got very high taxes, and what's happening is a lot of those medium-sized, even big companies, are actually leaving California and moving to places like Arizona, Nevada, Texas, even Florida to a point. Actually, no, the New Yorkers are moving towards Florida, because what's happening is that they don't actually have to pay corporate tax. So they're beginning to flourish, whereas California, putting up all these taxes, they're considered a sanctuary city, so they want to let in all these illegal immigrants, and we'll say the word illegal immigrants, because they're not coming through border control. There's huge problems over there, and people are leaving, and they're actually at least 1.2 trillion in debt now. That was the statistics about a year ago.
People don't realise the magnitude of the changes, do they? In fact, a good friend of mine who effectively was a little bit of a tax exile, he spent a lot of time, increasing amounts of time, living in California, and he moved over the last year and has gone to Portugal.
They're leaving in droves. The big companies are leaving in droves, and I think they did it in Seattle, or they were threatening to do it in Seattle. And Amazon said, actually, then we'll just move. Then we'll move to another place. But because of the high taxes, same. I think it's the same in Connecticut when they put the high taxes, and that's where a lot of people used to have the large hedge funds and things like this. So guess what? People with money move to other areas. So they're not.
But actually, that's just a tiny minority, isn't it? Because let's face it, most of us have to put up with living in one area.
Yeah, you'd be surprised.
Well, you're talking about power moving, absolutely.
Yeah, power moving. And the thing is, all of a sudden, they can't cover the deficit, because I think there was even something I read in about California to do with there was a sanitary worker. He was earning like a $230,000 a year pension, which is ridiculous. So they can't even cover their pensions. The states are not because a state can't go bankrupt. But a lot of the places like Stockton and Crompton and San Bernardino, they're all going bankrupt over there.
Interesting.
Because they can't, and all of a sudden now, I think you've got San Diego, who are now wanting to go against this sanctuary city, but because it's been democratically run for so long. In fact, I think the last governor over there was Republican, was Arnold Schwarzenegger. When I think it was doing very well. Now it's just gone downhill, and that's just another example of how socialism doesn't work.
Correct.
And the thing is, I keep asking people who defend it, and when I had this conversation, and I said, give me an example where socialism actually has worked on a long-term basis. Does it work initially? Yes. But not long term. It's the same that happened in Venezuela. Eventually, it's like giving someone. Here's an analogy. It's like giving someone a credit card until they max it out, and once it's maxed out, they've got nothing, and then they're chasing.
See, but true Marxism has never actually even existed. You haven't had a 100% Marxist state. By definition, because the elite always are in a position of privilege.
Well, people, yeah, but when it came to state control, I mean, even in communist Russia, it wasn't. You didn't get there on your, which I suppose what right wing is, and just to clarify, or how I see it, you get there on your own merit. Whereas actually, when you had these state-controlled things in Russia and things like that, it's actually the level of connections you had as well. So that hasn't changed in that respect.
Interesting indeed. And just for talking briefly then about power and money, why is it that Trump is beginning to be so positive about forging links with Britain if it leaves the EU? Simply because it's control of finance. Because America knows it's getting increasingly shaky ground now, and therefore Britain with its incredible banking system, America wants to have a hand in that.
Of course, but also
Europe doesn't want to lose it.
Yes, of course they don't. But the thing is, they haven't been playing ball properly. They've attempted to bully us, and this is where the Liberal Democrat MP leader Joe Swinson, who said, I think in an article, I think it was last week, who said women are not weak, and she made this huge statement about women are not weak. Actually, no, women are not weak as a whole. But then again, people can be weak, and and I think she's weak. Just because she's a woman doesn't make her weak. It's her character that actually makes her weak. Theresa May's character made her weak.
Why is Jo Swinson weak? Why is her character weak?
Well, the thing is, you see, she wants another referendum. All right, for a start, which goes against the whole democratic process, which really goes against what Liberal Democrats stands for a start. Secondly, she can't see that Europe has actually been bullying Britain for so long during this whole thing, and she will allow herself to be bullied by them to actually stay in Europe. And that's how I see it. She's not and at least when you talk about something like Boris Johnson, as detestable as he can be sometimes, actually he's actually standing up to them, and he could potentially get something out of it. But likes of her are making it that much harder. And the fact that she actually has to make that statement to justify it, although it already shows character traits of her weakness.
What statement?
that women are not weak. Why did she actually have to make that?
Why
did she
would
have
she
to
say that anyway?
I found it ridiculous. The thing is, no, women are not weak. Or people are not weak as a whole, but there are weak people and there are strong people. Just because you're a woman doesn't make you weak, but just because you're a woman doesn't mean you're not weak either.
Well, exactly. You have weak women and weak men, and that's all there is to it. But
I found her quite weak.
But you see, she's just another product of the polarized views, brought in by this increasingly self-service monkey house of a political environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because all she's saying is she's trying to get votes by getting the Remainers and saying whatever will happen, we will remain. But of course, her problem is that's against the referendum. Secondly, there is zero point in having another referendum, because if the side that loses forces another referendum, can you imagine what will happen if Remain wins this time? Then Brexit will want another referendum. So it shows zero grey matter, zero logic function grey matter.
But
and people just need to get on with it.
But actually, it's one interesting point you brought up about Trump and why he wants to deal with Britain. I think there's another reason that people constantly overlook, and I think he's actually got, as I said, he's also he's another detestable character out there. But the thing is,
doesn't make him a bad leader.
It doesn't make him a bad leader, no, not necessarily. In some cases, he's a bad politician. He's in terms of leadership, he'll make quick decisions and he'll make hard decisions. So, and not necessarily popular ones.
Like you have a good CEO who might be a terrible person.
Yeah. So overall, is he a good leader? He's as a leader, I don't think he's a bad leader. As I think as a politician, as a person, I think he's not a very nice person. But he does have an affinity towards the UK, and it's not just for political or business purposes. This is a guy whose mother was Scottish, and he still sees himself as being half Scottish in a lot of ways, or half British.
Would you want him on your side in a fight?
Of course you would.
Correct. Would you want Theresa May on your side in a fight?
Absolutely not.
Correct. Would you like Boris Johnson on your side in a fight?
Yes, I would.
There you go.
Yeah, but actually, it was. I think I said this in a podcast. I was speaking to someone in where I work over a coffee. And his father-in-law voted for Trump at the last election, but doesn't really like the guy. But he turned around and said, actually, yeah, he's a crook, but he's probably the best of the bad crooks out there. And if you want a crook on your side, if you want a crook, you want him on your side.
Would you like Jeremy Corbyn on your side in a fight?
Absolutely not.
Would you like Joe Swinson on your side in a fight?
Terribly not.
Exactly.
Absolutely not. No. The thought is actually shocking, and I think most savvy people can actually see that. And I think there's another. And I think they're blocking a general election because I think they're actually frightened what the outcome is going to be, because people seem to forget that these two parties who want to stop Brexit by even having another referendum will actually be shocked, because you've got to sell them more than half the country, albeit by a very small
you didn't
margin.
Mean that, did you? You didn't.
Sorry, what's that?
You said they need to be.
They need to be what? They need to be careful.
Careful, yeah.
They need to be careful, because the thing is, over 50% of the people still voted for a Brexit. And they're looking, and the thing is, they'll be very surprised at what's going to come out. And if you actually look at what happened even in the European elections with the Brexit Party on how well they did, it just also goes to show that actually they're not going to get it their own way.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Although saying that, I'm getting bored of Brexit now.
I think everyone is.
Yeah, but one thing you were talking, one of the other topics we were touching on was the thing about kindness and attraction. We're talking about kindness and attraction, weren't we? Most people go towards kindness and attraction, and I was questioning that.
Exactly. So there's a study that showed that people rate kindness above good looks and money. Although, of course, good looks and money is important, but kindness is more important in choosing a mate.
Well, those two, that good financial stability. Financial stability and attraction did come up very high as well. But they say kindness is more important. And I think actually if you actually questioned anyone, I think actually most people would actually say kindness. Even though they'd probably like it, it's probably the right thing to say, and it's the right thing and it's actually the right thing to believe in.
Also, I think it's a very poorly worded study. Because what does kindness mean? Does it mean I'm kind, so I give you all the money that I'm earning?
Yes, but
I'm kind, so I give you your way.
Yeah, but without physical attraction,